Amazon's spending on labor consultants soared to 14.2 million last year amid its efforts to squash union drives in the company according to a Labor Department filing. That's more than triple the total from the previous year when Amazon first began to confront organizing effort at its warehouses. An Amazon warehouse in Staten Island became the first to unionize in April 2022, but the e commerce giant successfully quashed organizing efforts at other locations. Large corporations frequently hire anti union consultants who craft and carry out strategies to persuade workers against voting to form a union. Amazon held numerous anti union meetings that workers were required to attend and phased vote no posters at its warehouses. Plastered no vote posters at its warehouses, both common tactics. A federal judge ruled in January that Amazon violated labor laws by threatening to withhold wage increases if workers voted to form a union. Amazon wrote in the filing that the consultants were hired to assist the company in expressing the company's opinion on union representation and to educate employees about the issues, election process, and their rights under the law. That's hilarious. Amazon spokesperson Alan Hard said that the usually large union election Amazon facilities required increased communication with workers. She added that Amazon in September invested $1 billion into higher hourly wages for customer fulfillment and transportation roles. So, like many other companies, we also work to ensure our employees are fully informed about their rights. Now, decisions about outside representation can impact the day-to-day lives working at Amazon, Hard said. The company's spending on anti-union consultant dwarfs that of other companies. Starbucks was the top spender in 2021, shelling out 4.3 million, while the next high figure came in at less than 2.7 million, according to a news report from the left-leaning Economic Policy Institute. The Economic Policy Institute estimated that companies spend more than 400 million annually on anti-union consultants. But the think tank noted that the data is incomplete because loopholes in law allow companies to avoid disclosing their spending by stating the consultants are merely providing advice. Senator Bob Casey told former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz last week that the company is refusing to disclose its spending to anti-union law firm Littler Mendelson. The coffee chain has drawn criticism from lawmakers for its anti-union tactics that in some cases have drawn labor law violations. And guess what? Under federal law, Starbucks is able to write off these costs as a run-of-the-mill business expense, meaning taxpayers are subsidizing union busting in the United States, Casey said. Man, that's a hell of a story. So, the first thing we have to talk about is the tragedy. Now, a lot of people, myself included, are proponents of wage increases. We think that a lot of regular people who work for companies are not paid the money that they should be paid. They're just not given the amount that we think is sufficient for the amount of work that they do. And oftentimes we're told that when you raise wages, companies fire people, and that a lot of times this is supposedly going to destroy business. And when you look at a company that can spend 14.2 million to quash union drives, which is not some requirement thing. It's not like a utility, right? It's not like they're getting cars or vehicles for their business. When they spend over $14 million on getting consultants and other strategies related to union busting, but they can't spend 14 million on giving people across the board higher wages. And nobody thinks that's pathetic, or that they're liars when they try to tell you that they don't support or they cannot implement wage increases. Now, the Staten Island Amazon warehouse that unionized, the caveat that's not mentioned in this article is that after it unionized, nothing changed. They didn't have any kind of actual meeting about discussing, negotiating. Amazon just kept delaying it over and over. So it really was more of a symbolic victory that it is possible to beat out big money in these large corporations. Um, so they have their spokesperson, one of these people that comes around and starts telling lies or tries to spin stuff. And she says that Amazon invested 1 billion into higher hourly wages for customer fulfillment and transportation roles. I mean, I don't know what that means as far as customer fulfillment and transportation roles. Like what did the 1 million specifically get 1 billion specifically get allocated to? Did it increase all their wages? Was it used to fund the things in which they are using to get transferred around? You know, it's just it's not really stated to that very in a very clear manner. Um, and the part where she says, we also work to ensure our employees are fully informed about their rights and how decisions about outside representation could impact their day-to-day lives working at Amazon. Well, outside representation should not be something that people that a company, especially a big large one, right, that can most certainly afford to have workers but respect them and actually negotiate with them for better conditions. A fair company that is trying to just look out for its workers is not going to go around with signs telling you to vote no on union efforts and making all these threats about you can't get a wage increase if you join a union. That's not what a fair, supposedly concerned about employees knowing their rights company would do. It's not. Um, it's interesting that Starbucks fell off. It was the top spender on anti-union consultants 2 years ago, and now it's not. But I really like that the article mentions that, because I said before, America's got a thing about laws for poor people and no law for those on top. And a lot of times, this means that there are loopholes that people use to get out of reporting things, such as the one mentioned here, that a lot of times they'll hire people as consultants, but not disclose their spending by just saying, "Oh, they're here for advice." Oh man, it's really sad that these companies are so afraid of a bunch of, I'm just gonna say it, a bunch of powerless, regular people getting together and joining hands and saying, "Hey, look, we want higher wages, we want paid family leave, we want um, basic accommodations by the major billion-dollar corporation we work for." These companies, with all their money, are so afraid of those workers getting together and saying, "Hey, we want better conditions than what we have," that they feel the need to spend millions of dollars on consultants, not to better relations between them and their workers, not to address the concerns of their employees, but simply to try and scare them and make them afraid with these various acts of aggression, the vote no posters, the threat that they would withhold wages if workers voted to form a union. What is that? If you vote for a higher, if you vote to be part of a group that actually cares about employees at these businesses coming together to extract victories, we're going to make sure you don't get the victory of a higher wage. Like I said, if we had a real federal government that wasn't bought out by many of these same corporations and their slush money, supposedly a bunch of coins is free speech, lying pricks that run this stuff, you would see unions getting backing from almost everyone in Congress. You would see this story being talked about in the news every day. The idea that people work for this large company and it feels like it can tell you through little subtle intimidation tactics, "Hey, if you want to join a union, well, that's all well and fine, but don't expect a higher wage. And we're not telling you can't vote for a union, but here's some little billboards and stickers and posters that say vote no." Just an extremely scummy tactic by a company that has so much money that they can waste it on these all these goofy theatrics to make to scare people, to scare their employees, but they'll never invest that same amount in actually helping them. Because like I said, if companies were really on top of addressing the concerns and desires of their employees, they would the employees wouldn't even care about forming a union. You would see people going, "Hey, you know what? Unions are nice, but I like my wage. Me and the rest of the guys, we get together and we send a letter to our manager, and they concede or they explain why we can't have something. We're doing well." But you see the reverse of that. You see a bunch of employees who are valuable, but are told they're not valuable, which is why these companies feel like they can make a threat toward you and go along with the status quo because if they don't, they may not be able to keep a roof over their head. And that's the biggest problem with labor in America. A bunch of people with money thinking they have all this power and control over somebody and trying to divide us because they know when we get together and we organize and we sign up and team up to squash their crap, all their coins go down the drain. There is a serious strength in numbers, and I hope someday, probably won't be this year or the one after that, or even the 5 years or 10 years from now, but I hope someday all of Amazon's workers, the ones that actually are going around doing all this sweatshop labor, decide we're sick of it. They get unions together, and Amazon would be lucky if it can even hire 5 people in one of these facilities. Because the way they treat their employees is something that is disgraceful. And I just they are so lucky that we have this corporate greedy political system over here, because if we had politicians that were actually for the people, they would address the way workers are treated. So it's a sad story, but it's an informative one. It's one that tells you about the screwed up practices of these companies and how they are afraid of us. They recognize that there are certain things that when people get together and do, it spells doom for their pockets. Because I said before, the number one important thing for corporations, particularly large ones, is making money. And when they increase wages, they feel like they're going to lose something. When they have to give people paid sick days, they feel like they're losing something. Unions especially terrify them, so they're doing everything they can to stay out of going into the danger zone, which wouldn't even be a problem if they actually cared about their employees and gave them living wages and other things that unions fight for them to have. That's the reason unions exist, because people in general know that companies do not care about them, which Amazon shows every single day with its little subtle intimidation tactics. Corporations, man, if only somebody could just destroy them. They need to be sucked dry of all of their employees. People need a mass protest.